Welcome back to another episode of the Pursuit of Progress podcast. As always, my name is Adam and I'm here with my co-host Ben, and we are excited to wrap up a three-part series that we've been focusing on over the last couple of weeks on real estate investing and really utilizing Ben's experience with this since he's got a successful portfolio of rental properties that are out of state. We're going to wrap this up today and just focus on a third and final aspect of this that we think is incredibly important, which is all about building a team. And before I pass it over to Ben, I just wanted to share a couple quotes that I found this morning that I thought were really relevant when it comes to just building a team and the success that is generated through having that solid team that you create. So the first one is by Steve Jobs, who we obviously all know who that is. Great things in business are never done by one person. They're done by a team of people. It's a pretty straightforward quote, but just, coming from somebody as successful as him, just understanding that, there's a lot more to the success than just one individual person. And then another quote is anonymous. I don't know who wrote this, but great real estate investments are built on the collective knowledge and skills of a well-rounded team. Every member plays a vital role in turning a property into a profitable venture. So again, just another reminder of how important teams are when it comes to scaling your business, or in this case, scaling your portfolio of rental properties. But after that long-winded intro, I want to pass it over to my co-host, Ben. Ben, how are you doing?
Hey, you know what? I'm really excited to be here, and I'm so excited to have this conversation because in 2024, it's never been more relevant. So we have a lot of great things to discuss today. And, along the same lines as some of the quotes that you shared, one that I have that I recently stumbled across is greatness is found in the agency of others. I think sometimes, when you're getting started out in a career or in a real estate, building your real estate empire, you might have a tendency to want to control every piece of the process and do things on your own and get all the credit. It is such a mistake when you look at all of the success stories now going back 50 years, 100 years during the American Industrial Revolution. I love referencing that period because that was such an emerging time in America. And I'm constantly reading biographies about these great American industrialists. But guess what? They never did any of that on their own. It really does take a team. And as part of that, you also want to play on the hearts of others. You need to get people to buy into your dream. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
Love it, man. And we thought it would just be really helpful for the audience to make this more of an actionable kind of a roster of who needs to be on a team if you are considering getting into this multifamily or at least just real estate investing game, because there's obviously a lot of trial and error that can happen, especially if you're brand new at this. But I think by having this strong team established before you even buy your first investment property, you're setting yourself up much, much more for success. So we're going to kind of go through each of these different roles. And obviously there could be others outside of what we're sharing with you guys today, but just some of the main ones to start thinking about and keeping in the back of your head if you are serious about trying to make this a reality. So Ben, I'll let you kind of first talk about just the first one is actually maybe more important for me to talk about as just a real estate agent, but I'll let you touch on that first since you do have some experience with obviously purchasing several different rental properties over the years.
Yeah, and before we get into that, let me just share my story really briefly. When I bought my first investment property, living in the Denver metro area, I actually bought out of state and out of market. And at the time, I didn't have a team set up and I didn't really know what I was doing. The reason that I'm glad that we're having this discussion is because in 2024, in some of these higher price markets, we've touched on this in other podcasts, you're not necessarily going to get the rental returns from a rental cash flow perspective that you might be able to get to in some of these lower price markets. And so from my perspective, I think there can be at times greater opportunity in lower price markets. With affordability being as low as it is in 2024, with property values being higher and interest rates being higher, it may make sense for someone to go straight into investing, even if they still rent their primary residence. And that's one of the things that's always kind of backwards, where I think sometimes a lot of people think they have to go buy their primary residence first before they can start their investment journey. And I am, being more proactive and vocal about that it may make sense to go straight into investing. The qualifying criteria is going to be a little bit different, and it might be intimidating, but that's what we're going to talk about today. It doesn't need to be impossible. And so, one of the questions that you just had was in regards to, finding a real estate agent. And I think that's very important. You want to find a professional that knows the market that you're looking to purchase in, have them set you up on a email campaign where you can start looking at properties. That's one thing that I always do myself is before I actually make a purchase, I want to spend 2 or 3 months just looking at properties so I really get an idea of, what I can expect, what is the price per square foot, what type of characteristics and amenities do these properties have, what location are they in. Once you start to familiarize yourself with the market, you then have the ability to start to identify deals. And not only that, another reason that you want to work with a real estate professional is because you're obviously probably not going to be an expert if you're buying out of state. And so you want to know where you're buying. Is this a good area? What are the school systems like? Is this going to meet my needs? And so if you're working with a local real estate expert, you're going to have a much better opportunity to find something that really resonates with what you're looking to accomplish.
Yep, very true. The only other thing I would add to that is just making sure that when you are interviewing agents or just, going down that path of communicating, contacting, agents from maybe a different state than you're currently in, making sure that they have some experience specifically with investment properties, just so they understand some of these nuances that are a little bit different from a traditional single family home. Understanding 1031 exchanges, which we'll talk a little bit more about a little bit later in this episode. Understanding what areas might be warranting higher rents. If you're doing short-term rentals like Ben has several of in Tucson, really understanding, the zoning and legal, requirements as far as if they're even allowed in certain areas within the city. Having an agent that really just is a little bit more versed on the investment side of the real estate game rather than just a typical agent, which the majority are, a little bit more just experienced with buying and selling just, typical single family homes that are being bought as a primary residence for their clients.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's such a great point because, there's a lot of real estate professionals out there. There's a lot of lenders out there, but I believe that you want to work with someone who understands what you're trying to do, but then is also trying to do the same things personally. And so that's usually how I build out my team. And, I'll have leads and prospects come to me on the lending side, and they might say, I'm interested in a home equity line of credit. And I'll tell them like point blank, like I'm not the best resource for that. There's going to be other banks or credit unions out there that are just going to offer more competitive terms. If I were you, I would go contact, this credit union because they're going to be able to get you a better interest rate. They're going to be able to get you better financing terms, even though we offer it. And it's something that we can assist with. It's not part of our, competitive niche kind of products for the bank that I work at. And so I want to be able to share that with customers that have those same practices myself.
If you find a good realtor that understands the investment game, they're going to have a great list of referral partners to already set you up with as far as building out this team. Good lenders, good home inspectors, potentially some legal counsel recommendations. They're going to have some of these different pieces that you're going to need to fill different roles. Hopefully, they're going to have a few recommendations for these people if they're also doing the similar thing themselves, or at least have other clients that are also looking for investment properties.
Yeah, and the underlying theme here is what we're talking about is what we're trying to communicate is that you want to have the ability as a prospective buyer and investor to really plug yourself in to someone else's network. And if you're working with the right real estate professional or individual, they more than likely are going to have a pretty diverse networking group with some relationships built out. But, you're going to be so much better off plugging yourself into someone's network versus trying to go find and build all these relationships on your own.
Yep, definitely agree with that. So the next role is somebody that would be very fitting for your career. So just a lender or a mortgage broker, somebody that's going to help them finance the deal. So this is before these first two are roles on the team that are pre-purchasing the rental property. So the second one, just the lender. Talk a little bit about what's important when searching for the right fit for that.
Yeah, I would say it's very important to find a lender that is going to understand and represent what you're trying to accomplish. Really not any different than a real estate professional. At North Point, where I work, the bank that I work at, we're licensed in all 50 states. We do primary residences, we do second homes, we do investment properties. We also have DSCR loans, where you can actually close in an LLC. They're made specifically for investors. On a DSCR loan, it's for individuals that may not qualify otherwise. They might be self-employed. They might own too many other residential properties, where they have greater than 10 investment properties. So it's just another outlet for individuals that are looking to really focus and grow their real estate portfolio. But you want to make sure that you're working not just with a bank that has these products, that you're working with an individual that has experience originating these types of loans. And then one step further, if you can also work with an individual who is doing these things themselves, that's another bonus. So where I work at North Point, we offer these products, number one. Number two, personally originate a lot of these type of products for my customers. I work with a ton of investors in different markets, out of state. And then number three, I am also personally practicing what I preach. So I have used investment financing. I have used commercial loans. I've done DSCR loans. I've done all-in-one loans. I've used home equity lines of credit to, purchase properties. So everything that I'm doing personally, I'm also advocating for my customers. I'm not here to make their decisions for them, but I want to let them know that I am not someone who's just talking about this stuff. I'm actually doing it.
Well, you're probably providing them with some alternative possible solutions to what they're trying to accomplish without maybe them even realizing they exist. And if they went to a lender that maybe doesn't have much experience in this, that, other suggestion or two that they might not ever even hear could prevent them from ever moving forward and finding a deal.
That's exactly right. And when it comes to real estate and financing, there's so many different ways to make a competitive offer and get into a property. And I've done the traditional purchase where I put a down payment and I finance the rest with a traditional loan. I've also used my home equity line of credit to go pay cash for a property and then refinance it at a later date. That's a completely different strategy. I've used the all-in-one product to go purchase something. And so sometimes buyers and prospects, they think they have to go down a certain path and they don't understand that there's all of these other options and paths. And so one thing that I always say is I'm here. I want to be a resource to you to really help you understand what your options are and help you make a decision. I'm not going to make a decision for you, but I want to make sure you understand what your options are and really make sure that you're asking yourself the right questions.
So before we move on to the next role on this team, I just have a quick question specific to the lending. So let's just say you mentioned at the beginning of the episode about there's a lot of scenarios, especially in a place like Denver, where the cost of buying a property is so expensive that there might be certain people that don't even own their current residence, and it might make sense for them to instead buy an investment property before they even buy their primary residence. What would be a couple of the big differences if somebody is maybe hearing that and thinking, oh, maybe I need to consider that? The first thing I think of is if it's a primary, they might qualify to put as low as 3.5% or 5% down. If it's an investment property, it might be requiring closer to 20%. I don't, quote me on that. Maybe there's some different strategies to avoid doing that in that scenario. But like, what would be a couple things to maybe share with the audience if they are somebody that's considering that as a possibility?
Yeah, when you're buying a primary residence, there's always going to be more flexibility and more options. And the reason for that is because it's viewed as less risk because you are going to occupy the property. And so the chances of that property going into default that you occupy are going to be less than a property that is either a second home or an investment property. So because of that, on primary residences, there are more options for down payment. You can get into a primary residence for as little as 5% down, and the financing terms are going to be more competitive. Your bottom line is you are going to get a better interest rate than if you purchase a second home or an investment property. But kind of my point is this: where if you buy something in Denver, Colorado, and our average single family residence price, let's say, is 650,000. Well, if you're putting 10% down on a $650,000 purchase, that down payment is 65,000. Now, you might be looking in a lower price market because there are other markets out there like Tucson, Arizona, or Tulsa, Oklahoma, which are two of the markets that I'm in. You can literally go buy a duplex in Tulsa right now for 200,000. Like literally go buy a multi-unit duplex for 200,000. So even though the down payment requirement is going to be higher on a percentage basis, anywhere from 20 to 25%, because the entry level is so much lower, your out of pocket a lot of times can be less. So in that example, you could go buy a duplex for 200,000, even at 20%, that's $40,000 down payment, and then all of a sudden you have two doors.
Mm-hmm.
And because of the rent compared to, even though the financing terms aren't going to be as favorable, the interest rate might be a half point higher, but you're only financing 160,000 versus 90% of 650,000. And then when you look at that compared to what the monthly rent is going to be, because in these smaller priced markets, the monthly rent is a much higher percentage compared to what the property is, compared to markets like Denver, you can actually get a lot more in rent comparatively. And so even though the financing terms aren't quite as favorable, it's still going to cash flow at a much higher rate than anything that you would be able to get in some of these higher priced markets where affordability is really an issue. And again, I'm not saying that this is for everyone and this is the right move, but what I am saying is that if you feel that you need, that you have a desire to get into real estate and that this is important, this is something that you might want to consider. And I believe, and this is just a personal opinion, I believe that real estate ownership is going to be more important than ever over the next 6 years, especially with the advancements of AI. We don't exactly know what our economic landscape is going to look like. One thing we know, though, is that people are always going to need a place to live. They're always going to, there's always going to be demand for that. And so short term, medium term, and long term, there are pros to owning real estate. And you want to get into the real estate game. Even if you don't live in your home, you still want to get into real estate and have the opportunity to own real estate.
And I could, without going down too big of a rabbit hole, we can, talk through a lot more of this later on, but just that mindset shift of understanding that, even though this property is out of state, does that really matter? As far as, let's just say you buy a home in Denver that's 5 miles from where you currently live as a rental property versus buying this home in Tulsa that's, several hundred miles away.
Yeah.
I mean, what really is the difference? I mean, yeah, there might be that if you're trying to property manage it yourself, then obviously there's an argument there to save money on the property management fees. But let's just say you're paying a property manager in either scenario. Other than just driving by the house occasionally, and honestly, maybe that giving you anxiety because maybe you see some of the grass is dying, or some superficial thing from the outside.
Yeah.
There really is no difference whether that home is, again, a block away or 2 states away,
Yeah, that's exactly right. And some of the lessons that I learned the hard way is when it comes to real estate investing, you really do want to leave it to the professionals. And so I have learned that I do not want to be a property manager because that's not my full-time job. Now, if that was my full-time job and I was in the property management business, that would be a different story. But, I'm a mortgage banker. I'm doing things with my family. I don't want to be the one that's having conversations with tenants that is, driving by the property and inspecting this stuff. I want to have and work with a professional property manager so they can go have those difficult conversations and follow up on the rent. And one of the mistakes that I see with first-time investors is that they do want to do everything themselves. They want to drive by the property and they want to make the comments on the grass. And that stuff is just going to happen. Everything is not going to go perfect. In the short-term vacation rental world, stuff is always going wrong. Stuff is always breaking. Every home that I own in Arizona has a pool. The pools are very costly. There's constant issues with the pumps. There's leaks. Issues with the filter, there's stuff constantly going on. But you learn to understand how the game is played, and that is why you want to be working with professionals that you can really trust, that are going to give you honest advice and insights at a fair price. Because if I'm trying to do all these things, make all these calls myself, I would go crazy and it wouldn't be worth it. But when I can hand this off, and yes, there is going to be an expense, but then these properties are really able to, everyone else is able to manage these properties on my behalf. I can then take my time and just invest it into the things that I want.
So that leads us into the next, person on the team, which I would argue is kind of the quarterback or one of the most critical pieces to the puzzle, and that is the property managers. A couple things I'll share before passing it over to Ben. Property managers, I think, as a industry standard, are typically somewhere anywhere between 8 to 10% of the monthly rent is the cost that you're going to be incurring to have a professional property manager. Just kind of keeping that in mind, just to use 10% for an example. So if you're renting out your 2 bedroom, 2 bath, single family home for $2,000 a month, you should expect, roughly $200 a month as this property management expense. And they aren't only, managing the property's potential issues that are going on. They're also helping you find tenants, doing all sorts of other stuff. And when it comes to a lot of these other people on the team, if you are out of state, this property manager, if you find a good one, should be able to provide you with some of these other key pieces of the team themselves. They're going to have recommendations for a good pool maintenance person, or a landscaper, or a good painter, or drywaller if you have to do a repair, all that kind of stuff. If you find a good property manager, they should be very, well connected within their city, and should be able to be very helpful on that respect too. So that's a really good question just to ask anybody that you're interviewing when it comes to property managers.
And to add on that, you want to be working with a property manager that is going to be specializes in the type of investment property that you're looking to own. So if you're looking to do long-term tenants or a traditional tenant, you got to be working with a property manager that manages those type of properties. If you're someone that is going to be, entering the short-term vacation rental business, you want to be working with a property manager that specializes in short-term vacation rentals. So my portfolio in Tucson, Arizona, I have 7 homes down there, and they're all short-term vacation rental homes. Now we have 1 or 2 homes that will kind of transition into medium term, where at times we'll, get 3 to 6 month bookings on, but that still falls in line with short-term vacation rentals. Now the property manager down there manages over 50 different short-term vacation rentals. And so the property manager that I work with is very efficient, knows exactly what they're doing. They're doing all of the communication with the guests. They take the phone calls. They check the guests in when problems come up with the guests. They're doing all of that. Now I can see a lot of that in some of the conversation logs in Airbnb or VRBO, so I still have access to that. But I'm not the one that's actually going through and making the calls. How do I reset the internet? The TV's not turning on. The ceiling fan won't go to high. There are so many little things like that constantly pop up with just about every guest, and they do all of that. But then to your point a minute ago, in the short-term vacation rental world, there is stuff that is always, when you manage 50 properties, but imagine how great the need is for someone that's in heating and cooling, or a reliable pool person, or a pool servicer, a landscaper. All of these homeowners have the same needs. And so working with a property manager that really specializes in this specific category, they're going to have, or they should have, these relationships built out. And at that point, you can plug yourself right into their network, and then you don't have to go find these relationships on your own. And so when I first started doing this, I thought I had to start making calls, when the AC went out. I would call like 4 or 5 different AC companies as the homeowner. And then I would, go and interview 3 or 4 different pool people. Now, I let my property manager deal with all of that stuff. And sometimes we do need to get, if it's a big job, we will need to get 2 or 3 different quotes. There was a property this summer where I was told by one of our vendors that we needed to replace an electrical panel, and it was going to be like over 10 grand. Well, really? Let's go get a couple different quotes on that and price that out and shop it out. And it turned out that we didn't need to do that. We just needed to get some parts, and we got it resolved for under $1,000. But my point is is I'm not the one that is actually doing any of this work. And so a great property manager, even though there's going to be an expense, they're going to save you so much time, and they really are going to save you a lot of money as well.
Yeah, I think out of all the different people on the team, that's the one that really is the most critical to find the right match and really find a property manager that really is understanding of the different scenarios, like you were saying, of short-term, mid-term rentals, all that kind of stuff, and just finding the right person. So definitely don't settle right away if you're, looking for that role at the moment. Just make sure you do your homework and vet a few different people, and really make sure you put a little extra effort into getting the right one, because it's a lot harder to replace it and get a different person and go down that whole, challenge. So we have, a few other, people on this team that we won't go quite as in depth on. I'll just kind of list these ones out. And then if we want to talk a little bit more about any of them, we can. So obviously the contractors, handyman, you mentioned, a good HVAC and heating and cooling person, electrician. There's just so many different trades, and really just having that Rolodex of, solid connections that hopefully your property manager can provide you if it's an out-of-state investment. So, contractors, handyman, electricians, plumbers, HVAC, all that kind of stuff, pool servicers, pool repairman, roofers, landscapers. I mean, you really put down a complete list. I bet there could be, 15 to 20 potential people that you want to have relationships with.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And when I describe that, I kind of think of it as, kind of a solar system where we have our inner sphere, our medium sphere, and then our outer sphere. The inner sphere, those planets that are circulating around the sun, those are going to be your transaction critical, your daily management critical. And so I would put a real estate agent in that category. I would put a reliable lender in that category. And then I would put a professional property manager in that category. And so those are the three most important, in my opinion. And then in that second sphere, these are going to be individuals that, you are probably going to work with on a regular monthly basis. But it's just not quite as critical because the stakes aren't as high. When you're acquiring the property, you're acquiring, an asset worth multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars. Same with the loan. You're going to be taking out a loan more than likely for multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars. With your property manager, they're going to be working with your tenants and your guests on a daily basis. So those are the most important. And then in that second sphere, I would put like a pool servicer in there, your handyman, your landscaper, anyone that's going to be doing ongoing, regular monthly maintenance. And that outer sphere are roles that are going to be still important, but you may not work with them, every single month. It could be once a quarter, it could be once a year, or maybe several times a year. But like an attorney, a real estate attorney, and I don't know, there have been a couple of times where I've had to contact a real estate attorney, and I have a really reliable one in my network. One of the properties I had a problem with the HOA where they were using some hostile language with me, and I had to get the insight of my real estate attorney and how to handle that. And his advice was incredible. And also a homeowner's insurance agent. I would put them in that second sphere too, to make sure that the property is correctly insured. And so one thing that I've learned is that, if there is whatever the issue is, we go straight to that person. So if there is a pool issue, I'm not asking for an opinion specifically, from the property manager. They might have an opinion from their experience, but we're going to go straight to the pool person. If there's a possible liability issue with the property, maybe there's some stairs and it doesn't have a railing outside, or there's stairs inside. Does it need to have a baby gate? Instead of, someone else in the network, let's go have a conversation with the insurance agent. What is is this a liability? Would there be liability on me for this? So it's learning to have the correct conversations with the correct individuals that are in your network, but learning to identify those roles, how important they are, and then continuing to build and nourish those relationships.
And the only other one that I didn't mention would just be an accountant or a tax advisor. Obviously, when you're especially at a point where you have multiple properties and you're building up a portfolio, there's so much strategy that goes into write-offs and making sure that you're limiting your taxable income each year. And there's just so many things that can be done a certain way to really save you a lot of money when it comes tax time. So I would say that would be another one that fits into that third sphere that are, maybe quarterly or semi-annually, where you're really creating a really good relationship with that person too.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. I have a real estate tax professional that I work with here in Colorado, and he is a lot more expensive than your average accountant. But the reason I use him is that he specializes in real estate. And so that is his focus. And so when you're preparing your tax returns on your Schedule E, there are going to be a lot of things that you can deduct from your revenue that your average person maybe not aware of. You can deduct your homeowner's insurance, your mortgage interest, if there's any HOA dues. If you know how to depreciate the property correctly, and depreciation is one of those amazing expenses because it's an actual expense from a tax perspective, but it's not an expense from a cash flow perspective. So you could have a $10,000 depreciation write-off on your taxes that's going to reduce your taxable income by 10,000, but it's a phantom expense. There's not $10,000 that's actually coming out of your bank account. And so it's learning the rules and how to take advantage of these different things. And that's why you want to spend money on the right individuals and the right professionals, because a great tax accountant and bookkeeper is going to be worth every penny that you pay them, and they will literally save you thousands.
Mm-hmm. So I know there's a few other really good tidbits that Ben's going to share with us. I meant to tease this at the beginning of the episode to make sure you guys stuck around till the end, because Ben has a few things that he's learned the hard way that I think are some really good tips to share with you guys. But one last comment on my end before we go to that point of the show. We talked about how, there's definitely this limiting belief that investing out of state is too difficult or just not the right move, and all these limiting beliefs behind this out of state investing.
Right.
I just wanted to make a point that I do think there is some value, though, in kind of keeping a very strategic mindset on, if you, let's just say you have your 1 year goal of buying your first investment property, but you also should
Yeah.
have your 5 and 10 year goal. Let's say your 5 and 10 year goals involve, by 10 years, you want to have a portfolio of 10 investment properties. There's definitely a lot of value in some, I guess, the importance of economies of scale is one way to put it, where having all 10 of those or the majority of your properties in the same area. So rather than buying one investment property in Atlanta, one in California, one in Ohio, one in Arizona,
Yeah.
you're going to have 4 completely separate teams for a lot of those different roles, as opposed to really identifying and having a clear strategy like you've done, which I think has really led to you being more successful than others, where you've really isolated and identified an area such as Tucson or also in Tulsa, and you've got teams in those 2 places that are only continuing to get more and more skilled and versed with how they interact with you and what just kind of the expectations are. You're going to
Mhm.
really run into some headaches if you, again, just have this squirrel syndrome where you're looking over here for one property, looking over here to another property. And just my personal opinion on that, I think it's much, much better to at least keep your investment properties, wherever they may be, somewhat consistent when it comes to location.
Yeah, I would agree with you 1,000% on that. And right now, I mean, those are the only 2 markets that I invest in, because it's not just about, the opportunity and the investment prospects. It's about the fact that we have an entire team built out, and it makes it so much easier. And for example, my portfolio in Tulsa, my brother is my partner and my property manager. And I don't think I shared this with you or with anyone, but, a couple of weeks ago, we had a duplex. One of the units in our duplex was rolling over, and my brother went over there to inspect the property, and we found that a homeless person had moved in the backyard and literally set up an encampment. There were tents. There was a air conditioning unit. There was a queen size bed in there, and they had illegally moved in. And so within 24 hours, because he's my property manager, he got the bobcat over there and just rolled all of this. And he also owns a trailer and a dump business. And so literally within like 12 hours, all of this stuff was escorted out with the bobcat and then put into the trailer and then hauled off to the dump.
Where was the homeless person during all of this?
He was out. He did come back like as my brother was wrapping up, and he's like, "Hey man, I thought I had like another week." He's like, "Oh, I had another week before the lease was up," because I think he was a family member of a person that was under contract there. But that's what you get with a great team, someone that's going to do the dirty work and is not afraid to have those difficult conversations or take action when needed. And so I'm not having to go do those things. He's taking care of all of that, and it's so much easier. But yeah, I agree. Like the only markets that I'm looking in right now are those two markets. I'm looking for deals in Tucson. I'm looking for deals in Tulsa, and that's where my focus is at. I'm not focusing on any other place or thing for the exact reason that you mentioned until we're ready to take that next step and really start moving in and attacking another market.
Yeah, I was just one last thing to that is there's scales, there's levels to this, and you're over the last, 5 years stepping up from one to the next. And I think that at a certain point, there is definitely some value in mitigating your risk and having, a portfolio in one market and maybe another portfolio in the second market, where if one for some reason starts to tank, you still have some of your resources or some of your investments, I should say, in maybe a different market that's a little bit more stable, or you're not putting all of your eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
At a certain point, that's once you get to that next level and you maybe have 5 in one location, then you're moving to somewhere else. But just initially, when you're only maybe 5 units or less, having one here, one there.
Mm-hmm.
And we could also definitely do a further deep dive on the value of large multifamily, which kind of goes along the same point where this economies of scale topic, where the investors that start off in small multifamily, the majority of them within a few years understand that same concept and understand that, why work 3 times as hard with these 3 different properties when I could work on one property that has multi-units and basically put the same amount of effort in, but have 3 times the return. So we'll go more deep in large multifamily later on, but
yeah, you have one roof and you have, a lot of times instead of fixing 7 roofs or 7 AC units, it's more centralized. Kind of to your point with diversifying in other markets, and so that was exactly my strategy in Tucson. My concerns with that market longer term is just water, and so I'm not talking about like the next 5 years. I'm talking about the next 5. I'm talking about the next 10, 20, 30 years. So a much longer time horizon.
Water meaning what? Water meaning that you won't be able to have
water in the sense of just the Colorado River evaporating right before our eyes. And is this going to be a market that is going to be habitable 50 years from now, 30 years from now? And so that's why I started investing in Tulsa, because it's a different climate. In Tucson, we're doing short-term vacation rentals, and so that would be considered higher risk, higher reward. But then in Tulsa, it's a lot of it is government housing. And so they're really on opposite ends of the spectrum in different markets, in different climates. And so it's a great way to do exactly what you were just referencing as far as just diversifying some of that risk.
Love that, man. Really proud of you, man. You've done a really good job with just having a very clear strategy. And that just is obviously the proof that how important that is to be successful, just versus just shooting from the hip and, oh yeah, this looks like an interesting investment. Let me buy that. And then, oh, this over here looks interesting. Let me buy, having very clear intentions behind not only your current strategy, but where you want to be in 5 to 10 years.
No, I appreciate that. And it doesn't mean that everything is always roses and rainbows. I've had some great buys. I've also had some things that have not been great buys, but you live, you learn, and you adjust, you adapt. But my goals and my vision are not short-term in nature. And when you play the long game in real estate, you have a long-term outlook. It's very, very difficult to lose. And so that's always been my perspective. I'm not looking to do this for just this year or the next 5 years. Real estate is going to be part of my life for the rest of my life.
Yep. So before we close out, let's just hear a couple of these other tips that you've learned, kind of going off of what you just said about some of these trials and errors and some of the challenges you've had over the years. What are a few things you can maybe share with us that would just be good, kind of quick little tips to keep in mind?
Yeah, one thing is, and this is really really important, especially out of state, is automating rent collection. Now, for short term vacation rental stuff, this is usually pretty easy because a lot of the guests are going to come from platforms like Airbnb or VRBO. We just started doing direct bookings through HomeAway and Google. But in all of those cases, the rent is automated. So the guest pays in full for the reservation at the time of the booking, even if it's 2 or 3 months out, the guest pays up front. And then we get our money, after they check in. So all of that is automated. It goes right into the bank account. There's never any question if it's going to come in, and it's very, very easy, very streamlined. We're not having to make calls. Did you pay your rent? Did you make your deposit? None of that's happening. And then also the portfolio in Tulsa, even though the tenant is different, a lot of the tenants we have are government housing, but not all. But what's great about that is that either all or a portion of the rent is coming from the government. So we have that. And then for those tenants that it's not, we still use an automated rent schedule where they have the ability to pay right online, and then that automatically goes it is deposited directly into the business bank account. So it makes it so much easier from an accounting perspective, and then just a time management and efficiency perspective. So that's one that's really really important, automating rent collection. Another one that I have on here is networking with neighbors. You want to have an idea, just give your neighbors a courtesy and let them know what your plans are and what you're doing. You want to be friends with your neighbors and don't try and hide anything. And you want to have the type of relationship where if they ever have any concerns whatsoever, if a guest is being too loud or being a distraction, you want to let your neighbor know that you are here and willing to make them a priority. You want to, because you're planning on doing this long term, you want to have a positive long term relationship. Now, when I say that, I'm not saying that I'm the one that's having the conversations with the neighbors. That's not me, that's the property manager. And so the property manager needs to understand that, and our property manager does. Like, she'll go over and introduce herself. She'll give the neighbors her phone number. She lets them know that if there's ever a concern, please text or call me directly. And from time to time, that will happen. But we want to be friends with our neighbors and have good community relations. So networking with neighbors is really, really important. And then also having the ability, number three here, is to access or inspect the property on a regular and consistent basis. In the short-term vacation rental world, there is this ideology that everyone's always so concerned that their home's going to get trashed, and there's so much more risk with that. And I'm here to tell you that's just not the case. If you do a good job, if your property manager does a good job vetting the guest up front, go look at their reviews, see what other hosts are saying about them, and where are they from. We don't allow guests to book our properties that are from that are there in market. And so if you want to stay at one of our properties, you have to be out of market, meaning that you're visiting. You're not, you don't live in Tucson. You have to be coming from outside of Tucson. And we have never had a property trashed. And the reason for that is because, number one, we get to access and inspect all of the properties on a regular basis. Before every guest checks in, we have our cleaning team there, cleaning up, taking photos, assessing the condition of the property. And it doesn't mean that things don't get broken, or like things think that will happen. But there's a difference between something getting broken and a guest just having a party and trashing a property. So we're very clear with what our expectations are. We have our house rules, and we know what our boundaries are, and we follow those boundaries. And because we have that built out, it really reduces and minimizes the chances of a property getting really badly beaten up. With the longer term stuff, same thing. We'll still be able to go into these properties on a quarterly or semi-annual basis. And at the end of the day, we just want to make sure that the properties are being respected, and that's what we're looking for. So getting in there, accessing, and having the ability to inspect the property.
And with the mid and long term rentals, that doesn't have to be a negative type conversation with the tenants. You can really make that be more of a, I'm being proactive and just want to make sure there aren't anything, any repairs, any little, any doors not closing properly. Is there any screen doors that need to get adjusted? Anything like that. You can really turn turn that and make that more of just another value add that you're providing to your customer, your tenant, as being a, additional level of customer service and being proactive. And so don't think that that has to be this I'm checking up on you type scenario.
That's exactly right. The strategy that my brother uses is he does courtesy air filter changes.
Yeah,
So
great.
he'll go by and change the air filters once a quarter at no charge, and bring that in, change it, and then at the same time just kind of get an eye on things.
So one question kind of about your brother and your guys' dynamic there. Since he's acting as the property manager, does he make it known to the tenants or whoever is, whether it be a short-term, mid-term, whatever the home or the property might be, do they know that he also is the owner, or is he really putting on a different hat and trying to be kind of under the radar where, no, I'm the property manager, I'm just coming in to, is he, I could see that in certain scenarios, you don't necessarily, like another reason why a property manager could be very valuable is when you self-manage your properties, you can go down to become a scenario where you have this relationship with the tenant and then I'm going to be late on rent this month, or, you kind of fall into a trap of some of that stuff happening. So is he pretty clear about, being...
Yeah, it can be a very uncomfortable dynamic if the tenant knows that you are the owner of the property and then you're also the property manager. They can make certain threats. They can play on the strings of your heart a little bit more.
Mhm.
And I think that's a mistake. I think that if you are in this business, number one, that's another reason why you don't want to be the one managing these properties. You want to be working with someone that has the experience, knows how to deal with situations, at times hostile situations, is an expert communicator, and it is truly an expert. And with my brother, he is in property management, and so he does this. It's one of his full-time gigs that he does. But we also, at the same time, we have all of our properties in LLCs, kind of for that same reason, and so he technically is not an owner of the property, when we're having those conversations through that lens. And I don't believe that he ever discloses to the tenants that, he's an owner of the property for those exact reasons. I've never specifically asked him that, but that's what I believe. And I believe that he is, communicating with them and responding to them specifically as the property manager.
Mhm. Yeah, that's smart. Cool, man. Well, I think that was really helpful. I got some value out of that too, just hearing through some of those experience shares that you had. Is there any last minute things you'd like to say before we close this one out?
Yeah, one thing that I just like to say is, I'm always going back to vision. And if you're someone that wants to get into real estate, like I did, I was 18 years old and I wrote on a piece of paper that I wanted to be a real estate investor when I was 18. And I put that piece of paper, I hung it up in my bedroom wall as a teenager. And I took that with me to college. When I moved to Arizona, I hung it up in my room there. I've always had it with me until I bought my first investment property. And so if you have a goal, whether it's real estate or not, make sure that you really plan out a vision for yourself and make it a priority and don't give up. Because when you have a vision and something that you're working towards, it gives all of the day-to-day stuff that doesn't seem like it has much meaning. It gives it so much more purpose. And so if you have a vision for yourself, you can then have, you can stay focused, you can stay on message. And I'm just such a big believer in that. I think I just don't see people, and I don't know if it's just the people that I'm talking to, but it just seems like I'm not seeing as many people that have really defined goals and a vision for their life. And if you want to do big things, you can. If you want to accomplish incredible things, if you want to be a real estate investor, if you want to be wealthy, like, we live in America, you can do all of that stuff.
Yep. It's just a matter of breaking down that big goal into actionable steps that you can take on a daily basis. And before you know it, you'll start seeing some momentum and it'll become a reality. Well, you guys, hope you had a great and very informative experience as I did today on the Pursuit of Progress podcast. Look forward to sharing an all new episode with you guys. As always, every Friday, we release new episodes. And the best thing that you can do if you're enjoying these is just share it with a friend. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Ben?
Have a great week. This is Benjamin Adams signing off for my co-host Adam Ling on the Pursuit of Progress podcast. Have a great week, everybody.